All right, we're here with Justin and Sarah Piercy. So excited to have you guys on the podcast and hear a little bit from you. Now, Justin and Sarah are not strangers to some of you who are listening. Both have served on staff at Connexus. You often see Sarah hosting at our Barrie location on a Sunday morning. And I'm so excited to talk a little bit about your journey. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jeff.
Now, Justin, you worked on staff at Connexus for how long?
I think it was about 14 years, so a long time.
Long time.
Yeah.
And Sarah, you're on staff for?
About 8 years.
So I've worked with both of you
Yep.
for a long, long
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And, you know, the reason I want to have this conversation is because so often when you hear stories of people in their work, people in their careers, there's a story that gets celebrated, and rightfully so, where someone says, hey, I was in the business world. I had a career and I felt called to ministry, full-time ministry, quote unquote. And so I decided to leave that and go and work at a church. And that's great when
Yep.
someone's calling shifts.
Absolutely.
But the conversation that doesn't get celebrated as much, and that actually was my story, having taught high school and then moved into ministry. But what doesn't get celebrated is the spiritual side of people who are in ministry like you
Yep.
have been, right in the trenches of it, from portable church, the very beginning of Connexus, into launching a full-time business
Yeah.
and being called out of quote-unquote church ministry and into full-time business.
Yes.
And I'd love to just hear a little bit about that journey today, of what that has been like for you spiritually. You know, when you start to consider, hey, is God calling me to something different? What are the kind of things you wrestle with there?
Yeah. Great question. And there was a lot of wrestling as we were, I think, making the transition into what is currently our full-time business.
Yeah, and so just share with
Yep.
people in case they don't know, what is the business you're in now?
Yeah, right. So we work, I guess you could say, in digital marketing, kind of focused within the coffee industry. We have a YouTube channel that we run where we review a lot of coffee equipment for home baristas. We have an Instagram account where we're doing something very similar. And we're just getting into doing local coffee roasting and pop-up cafes.
Okay,
as
great.
well.
And
Yeah.
locally, a lot of people know you as Daddy
Yeah.
Got Coffee,
Yep.
but I know there are another
Yeah.
number of other brands there as well,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
So back to the question,
Yeah.
when it comes to what you were wrestling with and
Yeah.
thinking through.
Yeah, so when we made that transition, the main thing was, I mean, we had kind of had this opportunity that had been growing and was seeming like it was in front of us with this coffee digital stuff. And as we were thinking, you know, maybe we should consider making this a full-time thing, the main consideration for us spiritually was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, we don't want to jump into something for the wrong reasons, right? Like just to make money or grow a platform, or we really wanted to make sure that our hearts were in the right place and that this was a holistically good opportunity to kind of make a shift into. Would you have anything to add to that, or?
I think saying holistically good,
Yeah.
that language is really important.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure we were moving toward an opportunity that was aligned with who God made us to be. And if there was ever a red flag, that the answer to that was no, this isn't aligned with who you are, then we would have needed to turn around.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about like what that journey is. You know, what are the principles you could tease out around, hey, I'm wondering if God's calling me to something. What did that look like for you?
Well, it started with opportunities that were snowballing in front of us
Yep.
that we had put in effort into, but they were growing. The opportunities were growing, and we were looking at it and asking the question, like, is this from God? Should we be receiving this and leaning into this?
Yep.
And if we step away from ministry, are we stepping away from something God's calling us to?
Yes.
And I think we eventually answered that question as we're not stepping away from God. We're stepping toward God. We are still engaged in love our local church. We're still engaged in, perhaps we serve in our local church with no strings attached a lot more.
Even more for sure.
And our calling in our lives fundamentally hasn't changed. The way vocationally it's changed, but the the calling on our lives. We still want to love and serve our community.
Yeah.
We still want to connect with and love people that don't know Jesus. We still want to raise our family to follow Jesus. Like, those callings are all still foundational.
Yep.
And the way we make money as a family looks a lot different.
Yep. And I would say, like, in terms of process, like, there was a big process there of trying to discern whether or not this was the path that God had for us. A lot of prayer, obviously, a lot of wise counsel. Those things were really critical for us, and also, just really making sure our hearts were in the right place, and that we were not going down a path toward an opportunity just because there was opportunity. For us, it had to be holistic, vetted by our inner circle, and all that stuff. But it was definitely a big spiritual process, even just to get to a point where we're like, yeah, we should consider this. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there was like a felt momentum there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would also say it took faith to walk away from a consistent paycheck into where is the next payment coming from?
Yeah.
We have to go find out.
Yeah.
That in itself took
a
spiritual element of faith. Like, God is going to provide to
Yeah.
this path.
And it's interesting because I know, like, when you're in ministry, it never is a paycheck. Like,
No,
you're never there for a paycheck. But the reality is also, when you have any job, it tends to be stable, predictable. And that was a leap of faith, moving into something that was very unknown. And yeah, that did take faith too. So that was part of it also.
So that season of trying to figure out, okay, I'm moving from, just from a practical standpoint, a regular paycheck to launching my own business.
Yes.
That's a step of faith.
Yes.
Then wrestling with the layer of, okay, also on top of that, I was serving in a church full time.
Yes.
What does this mean about my heart that I'm
Yes.
moving towards something that has a level of profit attached to it? What did that do to your faith?
Yeah.
How did that impact your marriage? I'd love to hear that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, working together, like, it's funny because we had experience working together before we were
coworkers
ever.
for a
Yeah,
long
at
time.
Connexus, right?
Before we were husband and wife.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, we've learned things on a totally other level.
Sure.
Yeah.
Since, like, going in a couple of years ago and starting this thing. But also, I think from a faith standpoint, there was really on the front end a lot of paying very close attention to our heart positioning and our posture. And then as things progressed with moving out of ministry and actually being in running a business mode, we actually got to see God moving in our lives, and us coming into alignment with what God was doing in totally fresh ways. Relationally.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that we found that opportunities to be interacting with people who are outside the church just happened a lot more organically once we were running a business than when we were facilitating ministry in a practical sense full time. And so we got to see God and are seeing God continue to move in that way in conversations that we're having on a regular basis, just as a part of our day to day, in a pretty cool way. So that's kind of a two-sided answer, on the front end, making that shift. It was all about discernment, the posture of our hearts. What are the values that we want to live out in our faith and as a family? And making sure that all of our decisions were in alignment with all of that. But then in retrospect, we saw God do something that I think was unexpected. We are having spiritual opportunities in our relationships that are opening themselves in ways that they didn't when we were in ministry full time, ironically.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's a level, I guess what I hear you saying is, like in the church world, there's a level of church ministry, there's a level of facilitation.
Absolutely.
for people to encounter
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to get done.
Yeah.
And it's like when you come to a church service, you don't always recognize that. But it's like there's a lot of communication and boxes to check and make
And
sure
team
things get
building
done
and-
and
Yeah.
team building, and
Yeah.
you're investing in your team of volunteers, and like it's so much of it is centered around the act of doing ministry at scale. That personally, it's when you're outside that, there's more opportunity for you to actually do it personally, organically.
Right.
At least that's been my experience. It's been very interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna get both of you to finish
Yeah.
this sentence. Okay.
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 So this is a question about, man, God is at work in our work. That's what I've been talking about in the series. So I understand there's a family piece of this, but let's just focus on work. When it
Okay.
comes to your work, the sentence is, I feel God's presence most when what? When I'm doing what?
When I have done a job well.
And go ahead.
It almost doesn't matter what the job is. I would even expand it to say, like, outside of work that I am making money off of, I feel God's presence when I repaint the swing set well and it looks good. Like when I do a job well, I sense God's pleasure in that, in my own pleasure of the job well done.
Would you
Does that make sense?
would you say that was the case when you were working at a church? Like, has something shifted there, or would you say it's the same?
I would say working at a church, I would see the relational fruit, or I would hear somebody say, you did a really good job on that, or thank you, you've really made an impact on my life. That doesn't happen as much in my life anymore. So when that piece is missing, it's like sensing God's pleasure in my work is different. It's a little bit more, my work is a little bit more practical, less spiritual, but there's importance to a job well done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I look at Genesis 1, I mean, I think about God creating us in his image, and God doing all this creation, and then on the seventh day, delighting in it, taking that seventh day to delight in what he created. And it wasn't like the human beings turned back to him and said, thanks so much for making us, that it was just a delight in something done and something done well. So the fact that we're made in his image and we feel the same makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I would say like there's kind of one concept that stands out to me, and it's like the kingdom is here in the here and now, and it's coming soon. It's kind of this weird mystery of like how all that works.
Right.
And I would say I really get that pleasure. I sense God's pleasure in my work when I am bringing that kingdom coming now, here. And when I do a little slice of that, that's when I really feel that alignment. And
Give me an example of that.
yeah, totally. And I get that's kind of abstract, but within coffee, like it's just number one, it's just such a tactical, experiential thing to enjoy a really good cup of coffee. And I think there are so many layers to that experience that are just honoring of God and his creation. Number one, it takes so many different people to make that experience happen, from the people who grow it to the people who process it, the people who ship it, roast it. And then you get it in your cup and you have to make it, and somebody has to design the thing that you make it with. And then you get to make it, and then you're enjoying it. And the person who made your cup, like there's all these layers of this very fine craft that people have really worked at to honor this experience that comes. And I think when you help people connect those dots and take it from something that is basically a commodity of like mechanical, like I need a shot of caffeine, so coffee does that for me, to a more integrated appreciation of that experience. It's just very honoring to God's creation, in my opinion. And Anytime people can connect that and share in that experience, and we can bring positive kingdom-minded values to that entire process, I really feel rewarding in that, and it's very accessible. Makes people slow down for conversation and allows for a lot of discovery. So I think when people are discovering those moments and those connections in creation through, for us, this beverage, and I think in ministry, it was kind of similar. Like, I was really working to get people to experience new things and wrap their heads around new ideas and point them towards the beauty of what God has in store for them and the world. And I think when I can tap into that in some way, that's when I get the most amount of pleasure in my work. And I wouldn't actually say that calling has really changed. I just love doing that. So yeah, that's kind of how it's a bit of a roundabout answer, but
but it's the kingdom part of all the pieces.
Yeah, totally.
And it's so interesting that you give that example. There's been kind of two big books I've read on this topic in my life. Every Good Endeavor, Tim Keller, highly recommended book. Garden City, John Mark Comer.
Great book.
Which is basically like a 2.0 version of Every Good Endeavor. One of those books, I can't remember which, actually uses coffee as the example of seeing the beginning to the end of something. And it's everything from, we don't think about it, but like, as you're saying, bringing the kingdom to every part of it.
Absolutely.
From the way the farming is done, to the cup that it gets served in and the sustainability of it, to the experience of the person. And when I'm sitting having my cup of coffee in the morning in my green chair, somehow it's gone through that process, and how kingdom honoring is it? And that's something that you're thinking about on a regular basis.
Yeah, like for us, there was one moment that I know we talked about as we were getting ready to come here and chat about this, and we were in Guatemala, and we got to sit down and record that became friends of ours, the story of these two people who inherited this farm. It was derelict, abandoned, and they took that entrepreneurial spirit and revived it. And that was actually our first cup of single origin coffee we ever had, was from that farm, from them. They had grown it. It was one of their first crops. And then fast forward 10 years later, we were sitting down with them telling that story on video. And for us, that was just a moment of like getting the chance to take that redemption, that story, and share it with a lot of people. Was just a moment where we really felt connected to, we were doing what we were supposed to be doing.
Right. Right.
I had the same feeling when I used to get to sit, my favorite part of my job in ministry was sitting behind the camera when somebody was sharing their baptism story.
Right.
I loved that.
Yeah.
And I had that same feeling when I was sitting behind the camera, drawing out the story of this couple and how they grew this farm and what God has done in the farm. And I think good business makes the world a better place.
Right.
Any kind of business.
Yeah.
Right.
So getting to share that story of how their business was making the world around them better was like,
you could see the transformation in
powerful.
their community.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Not only you discover it, you get to share it. They get encouraged by it. You create something that inspires other people.
Absolutely.
Like I shared in part 1 about in Genesis 1, it talks about bearing fruit and multiplying and all of those different verbs. And I boiled it down to, steward, create, multiply, expand. And I have a theory that when you can do all those 4 things at one time, there is something about that moment. I don't really have a scriptural basis for it. It's just a guess, but there is something magical about when you do all those things at once. And I think when that happens for an artist, all those things is pretty cool. That story that you're telling is kind of all those things together. It's about stewardship. It's about multiplying the story, creating something, expanding the vision of what they're doing and the work of what they're doing. It's pretty neat when you give someone a platform that way.
Yeah, totally.
Talk to me a little bit about day-to-day ministry with people. So I think about all kinds of people who are out there working, who interact with clients, patients, customers, people who they purchase from, all of that kind of stuff. And you interact with people at coffee shows and online, and you're reviewing stuff online, and there are people who are talking to you, either DMing you or putting stuff in comments.
Yep.
I'd love to hear, like, I don't want to overplay it and say, what are the kingdom principles you use for interaction with people? Like, that's kind of over spiritualizing maybe. But as Jesus followers, like, what are the priorities for you when you interact with people?
Yeah. So the word that really comes to mind for me, and if you have a different answer, feel free. But ever since we started crafting our values, we have always wanted to approach everything we do with a very high degree of integrity. It's like, if somebody approaches us for some kind of partnership, we just go through the front door on everything. It's like, sure. It's like, we have these existing partnerships. Here's the type of thing that we can do. Here's the type of thing that we're not going to do. We try and play everything by the book. And that has always, in every interaction, I think we really try and bring the kingdom in that way. And
from an integrity standpoint.
And we just really try and do... everything is at face value. It's like, we say it, we do it. We're not perfect, obviously, but we really just try and bring that in every conversation that we have. And it's not always common. Like, sometimes when you're in the business world, you can kind of pick out, is there some motive behind the scenes of that conversation? And we just try and make sure that that's not ever part of what we're doing or saying. But there is another part of it too, where it's like I wouldn't say we don't lead with our faith in our business, but we don't hide from it either. And it's like, I've got people who will call me and they'll I'll just get a phone call and like they're cursing away on their phone, and it's like, I got this, like, you're still going to like that church thing, right? And it's like, I'm like, yeah. He's like, I got this guy, he's driving me bonkers. Like, what did church people do with that? And I'm like,
dropping a few F-bombs.
Yeah. And like, Sarah can, like, I've got the fun. She can be like, she'll perk an eyebrow sometimes, but it's when you just are like kind of open-handed, transparent, like you're not hiding anything, you're just putting it all out there. Then it's like opportunities will to talk candidly and transparently. I think some of the things that you talk about, where it's like, you've shared in messages before, you're the most transparent that way with the people who are closest to you. I think that we try and just live that. Like, we just don't go out blasting in every conversation like, oh, like we want to be Jesus followers. So just on the very front end of this conversation, we're going to be fully transparent. This is why. It's like, we just do it, you know? But as relationships deepen, that type of thing tends to come out more.
What about you, Sarah, when it comes to interacting with people?
I could go two directions with the answer to this question, and I can't decide which direction. First, I want to talk to email for a second.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. I've done email for many years.
Is email.
Many years of emailing in ministry and professionally as an executive assistant and as an operational director in our current business. Email can feel like 100,000 stones, depending on how many you have. But I think when we remember that there is a person on the other side of the email that we're going to send, it makes it more important how we engage in our email. It's a very small connection, but it's a human connection for now, till AI, who knows what that'll do to email. But it's a human connection. And when you think of it as like people just waiting in line to talk to you, you would receive somebody differently face-to-face than you would an email. And if you think of those emails as like, well, that's a person that either wants to offer me something or needs something from me, how am I going to respond to them? I think it humanizes email a little bit more and makes it less of a...
That's a good answer.
It makes it less of a to-do list. Emails are a terrible to-do list anyway. We don't need to talk about that.
Sure.
But then the other part of it is like in the day-to-day, open-handedness in dealing with people and making new partnerships and trying to negotiate. Open-handedness has been really key for us. And just like wherever this goes, God, we trust you to open or close the door. We will be honest. We will be transparent. We want to work with integrity. We are not going to compromise our value. Like, we're not going to do something super cheap that causes us to sacrifice what we need in order to sustain our family. When we're negotiating, like sometimes we get to a price on something where we're like, well, we're open-handed about this. If you can't do this, that's okay. We can't cut the price in half.
Right.
And there's just there's a posture of like, what would you call that? Open-handedness? Is that the best way to?
I think that's the best way of
Sincerity.
Yeah. There's like, sincerity, and we don't try to like arm wrestle into what we want.
Totally. Yeah. It's, if something isn't lining up, or the other scenario, I think we can sometimes sense that, I don't know, it's maybe just not good on both sides. Like maybe one side is going to get more out of a certain thing, then we'll just say, you know what, like let's stay in touch, let's keep connected, but maybe let's just pause this for right now.
Yeah, we always want it to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, totally.
And not that forcing a deal is bad in every scenario, but we just more take the position of, when it's mutually beneficial and a good fit, it'll work.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, then it's not.
Okay, so that's a lot of helpful principles there. If for anybody who's dealing with people, talk to me a little bit about like the purpose profit tension that some people would kind of think, oh man, it's interesting, like you're part of this, you're obviously still a part of the mission of the church, so that hasn't changed, but you're doing it in a different way because you don't work at the church full time any longer. I think a lot of people would think like, well, what do you do with the tension of like going after profit and making money and like, is it wrong to make a lot of money and all of that kind of stuff? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to that. I think purpose and profit are not always a push-pull. You don't always have to give one to get another, or, take from Peter to pay Paul, that kind of thing. I think whether we find or we are bringing purpose to a specific thing, I think that's an us thing and a God thing. And I think, just like we're open-handed in specific conversations, we have been open-handed with the business from day one. And from a profit standpoint, it's like, hey, let's see what this will do. And as long as it's working, let's just keep doing it. And I think we're open to however big that can grow. And if it ends up shrinking and we just need to all toss it out with the trash, we've been open to do that from day one. So I think, our business has survived. We're a couple of years in. Most businesses fail within the first year, so that's a win there.
Amazing.
We celebrated 1 year.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And now we're looking at doing some kind of expanded arms of the business here locally with the roasting and the pop cafes and all that. And if that all dissolves or it doesn't work, we'll just stop doing it. If it blows up, we're not going to move into a giant house.
Right.
It's like we try and reinvest into our business wherever possible, and we try and always live, our church does so much helping people budget well, and that has been really foundational for us personally. I think we, of course, always wish we did it a little better than we do it, but we try and live beneath our means, and really make sure we're not overextending ourselves. And I think that would be true even if the business were to quadruple in size. We would not quadruple our lifestyle. We would more or less probably keep it where it is.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's a difference between like building a business and chasing profit.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
That's what I hear. I hear like, oh, we're trying to build something. We're not going after profit. We're building a business.
Totally.
And those are two different things.
Totally.
And you need profit to build the business and keep building.
Yeah.
You can't not have any profit.
Yeah.
But there always needs to be more to it than profit.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like if you're only doing, and it's funny, you see this on social media all the time. Like if you're only doing your thing to get bigger, it's like, it's so hollow.
Yeah, people smell it.
Yeah. And it's those types of businesses rarely succeed. So, that type of engine tends to, like, it's running on fumes from the get-go, kind of. Whereas if you're bringing your purpose to it, it will, like, if you can figure out how to make it work, it'll keep running and expand over time if you reinvest and all that. But it's kind of like, that's a posture thing. You know, what is our posture in approaching this thing?
Yeah, like the whole, we're pursuing this, and if it works out, Jesus is there, and if it doesn't work out, Jesus is there.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
so critical. I had somebody come once who was new to our church, and they said to me, okay, like, I'm into this Jesus thing, I'm trying to figure it out, and the question I have is, how do I get Jesus to bless my business? And I said, oh, like, that's not the blessing of the Christian faith. And the person didn't understand. I said, no, the blessing of the Christian faith is, if your business blows up, Jesus is still
Yeah.
going to be there.
Yeah,
If
totally.
your business dies, Jesus is still going to be there.
Yeah.
That's the gift.
Yeah.
It's not like, sprinkle some Jesus on my
Yeah.
business and it's going to
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you do hear that, right?
Yeah.
As something out there.
Yeah. And it's like, it is tricky the way you talk about it, because I would feel like, if it were to just dissolve or stop making money or whatever, or YouTube were to turn off one day, we would have a lot of peace. It would be like, well, that was fun, you know? But I think also, if the business ever like multiplied in some exponential way, then I think we would also say, you know, what a blessing that is. And I don't think that those two ideas are mutually exclusive. You know, I don't think that the only way to say you're blessed is because your thing is doing great.
Right.
It's like, sure, if your thing is doing great, what a blessing that is. But if your thing is not doing great, you're still blessed.
Right.
You know, and there's a peace in that. So that just takes a lot of that. Like, I kind of worried, like, when I feel like panicky and frantic about trying to run my own business, and there's just been a lot of peace around it on all sides. Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with that.
I mean, I'll be honest, some days I wonder where the next paycheck is coming from.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Totally.
we need a paycheck this week.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? And there's been weeks where it's been like, okay,
Yeah,
where's it
totally.
coming from? Or are we dipping into the tax savings to pay ourselves? You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
But there has been a faithfulness and a peace to doing the next right thing. That's an Emily
Yeah.
Q. Freeman
Right.
phrase. But
Yeah.
to do the next right thing well,
Yeah.
we just keep doing that. And there is a peace in that. And we keep trusting. And if it all dissolves tomorrow, we will look for other means to continue living out God's purpose for our lives.
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, our purpose doesn't rise and fall on how we make money, but we
Right.
can find purpose in how we make
Yeah,
money.
Right.
totally.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And there is something about the integrity of building something. We've all worked for Carrie, who founded the church. And two of the things I learned from him was, one is, and Justin, you've already mentioned it, when you say something that you're going to do something, do it. And whatever you do it well.
Yeah.
And if you do those two things,
Yeah.
you're better than the vast majority of things that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a truth to operating with integrity that way.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question for both
Yep.
of you. So somebody's a business owner, they're listening to this today, and they're like, oh, or maybe they're even an employee somewhere, and they're like, oh, like, I haven't really been intentional about purpose or about faith in my business place or in my career, and I want to start. What's something that you would say, oh, you could just do this one simple thing today?
Start praying.
Yeah, that was going to be
Start
my
praying
answer
about
too. Yeah.
Open hands before God. God, show me where you are in this and where you want me to be. Would probably be my first instinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah. So it's so easy to just show up to work, and then leave work and then like try and think, oh, how could I have been more spiritual? Or like pray to change your behavior. The times where we've kind of felt the most aligned with God on this, at least personally, it's been with consistent prayer over time, to make sure that our hearts are in the right place about a specific thing, asking him to open the right doors, close the wrong doors, give us the opportunity in conversations to, you know, bring his kingdom into reality in different ways, open up new relationships. I would say when we're praying, that's when we feel that the strongest, and when also we have the most opportunities in that way with faith. But it's easy not to do, you know? And to be fair, when you're in ministry, it's easy not to do.
Right.
It's easy to just show up and work. And, you know, you feel like I'm working for a church, so that's spiritual, right? You know?
Right.
And that's easy to
By
do.
default.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's true regardless of the nature of your vocation.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been really rich. Appreciate both you guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.